While retirement is generally seen as a time of relaxation and self-focus, God calls us to love, serve, and help others for a lifetime. He has been preparing us for this retirement season, literally our entire lives. In retirement, countless Christians enter a state of spiritual dormancy, not knowing how they are called to have an impact for God's kingdom. The Retirement Reformation seeks to encourage and empower the 50 million Christians approaching or in retirement to embrace the calling God has been preparing in them. When the world says it's time to stop, you can begin to have your greatest impact. Welcome to iRetire4Him, the mouthpiece of the Retirement Reformation, where our goal is to journey from retirement to reformation so you can say, I retire for Him.
Did you know that when you retire, your calling doesn't retire? Your calling is a lifetime calling, and if you're still around, God's not done with you yet. I know you're fully aware of what you retired from, but what did you retire to? Did you have anything in mind? You've tuned into iRetire4Him, the voice and resource of the Retirement Reformation, an organization dedicated to you, the retiree who loves Jesus and wants purpose for all your days, especially the ones ahead. Bruce Bruinsma joins us today as the founder of the Retirement Reformation. He's here to encourage and walk with you through retirement. I'm your host, Jim Brangenberg. Check us out online, retirementreformation.org, retirementreformation.org, and of course on Facebook, just type in Retirement Reformation. You know, it's no joke when my retired friends say to me, growing old ain't for sissies. Growing older has all kinds of challenges, as you know. But it also comes with tons of possibilities. But in the last 60 years, retirement has gone from a few years to an average of 30 years. Sometime during those 30 years of retirement, a common theme starts to arise. It's called isolation. Isolation leads to many things that aren't very good, such as loneliness, addiction, divorce, bankruptcy, and suicide. We continue today with our 5-part series dealing with the impacts of isolation in our gray years. Today, we will talk about isolation, which leads to divorce. Rest assured, we will bring you the truth, and in that truth, the freedom to walk through a rough marriage patch, to experience flourishing in your marriage once again, and eliminate the isolation that took you where you're at right now. Bruce, the other day, I heard a story of a couple who have been married into their 80s, and now they're getting divorced. How the heck can this happen?
It's interesting, and I'm sure our listeners will respond as most do, going, oh, really? How can that possibly be? It is the dark underside of the issues of isolation and separation and the impact of our culture on our thinking and on our actions that nobody's talking about, nobody's recognizing. The story that you heard and the stories that I hear of those in their 60s, but then in their 70s and in their 80s that are getting divorced. And where in the world does that come from? And how does isolation play into that? Let me just start us in this part of the conversation with one observation. I'll tell you one of the places that I think it starts. Let me give you two. The first one is the time when we become empty nesters. That's the first time where there's a major change in the relationships, in the roles, and the way that we deal with each other as husbands and wives. All of a sudden, we're empty nesters. And who do you have left to focus on or to be a friend with? Your wife or your husband. And if in fact in the prior 20 or 25 years, you haven't experienced that or built that, in fact, it's a pretty shocking time. So there's a time of transition, a liminal period. That then shows itself up again when we go through what the initial from career to retirement stages are. All of a sudden, if your wife or husband isn't your best friend, man, you are really alone because you don't have any. Or it's an addiction that we talked about in a prior thing. Or, it's your buddy on the golf course. Or it's the bartender. Or it's the whatever that is there. And so the relationships change. So the first piece that sets this into going is the change in circumstance, which creates a change in relationship. Second, that I think is there, is that as we look at what our culture tells us about marriage, It says that marriage is a place where your partner is supposed to make you happy. And if they are not making you happy, you get a divorce and you find somebody else who can make you happy. Now, we all know that someone else can't make you happy on an ongoing basis. The only one that can do that is your relationship with God. And when people ask Judy and myself, just a week ago, we had our 61st wedding anniversary.
Congratulations.
Yeah, well, for sure. And people will say, well, you're married. What's the secret for being married that long? Here's the very direct, very simple, very straightforward answer. We didn't get divorced. And those are decisions. Because I can tell you that in the 61 years of our marriage, there have been times when we have not been rapturously in love. When in fact, we have tended to go some of our separate ways and we've found some distance. And then something happens and we say, oh yeah, that was the commitment that we made and we're going to stay close to it. And that is to make a decision to work through whatever the issues are. And I'm happy to tell you, I've fallen back in love with Judy probably 5 separate times over the 61 years. And some of them for the same reasons, but some of them for very, very different reasons as we grow older together. And so we see the impact of our culture and we see the impact of changed circumstances. Those two things, when you put them together, are what are driving the divorce rate among seniors.
When we talk about isolation, which leads to divorce, we got to deal with the isolation issue because I think it's easy to think, well, I am justified in getting divorced because nobody around me is telling me I shouldn't. Well, that's because there's nobody around you. Because if you were around a whole bunch of other couples and you actually said out loud, if you said, let's just say it was you, and you say, yep, Judy and I are thinking about getting a divorce because we're not happy anymore. Your friends would go nuts. They would say, what are you, stupid? They would say that. I'm sure they would. You've been married 61 years and you're going to give up now? It would never happen. They would go crazy on you. And you'd realize, well, maybe I'm thinking not straight. But most people that are thinking about divorce, they don't ever say it out loud. And the more they're thinking about it, the more isolated they become so that they are not around anybody that will tell them they shouldn't get a divorce. I've seen this. I've seen it with younger couples. Now, I haven't experienced as much with older couples. Bruce, do you have any friends that have gotten divorced in their 70s or 80s?
Yeah, I do. And it's all the issues that you see when you're dealing with couples in their 30s or 40s. They show up, but in different kind of ways in the 70s and 80s. First of all, there is the expectation that my life now I am going to be by myself and therefore I am going to be happy. Well, there's the devil's lie right there. We know because we've talked about isolation and we've talked about loneliness. When we are just by ourselves, we are not going to be happy. So it's only in relationship that happiness comes. So then what happens is that when you make that decision together that you're going to be divorced, not only does it impact you and your action plans for the next number of years, but also impacts your legacy. And we don't think about that.
What do you mean? What do you mean?
Well, when you're 70, the odds are that your kids may be 50 or 45. So now you're going to get divorced. What is the message that you are giving to your 45-year-old daughter and son-in-law? They're going through the same issues. So if you are modeling a solution for them because they are feeling isolated from each other and they are lonely from each other and they're either looking for a new partner or a way to get away from that relationship, you're telling them that's what you are doing. You, in fact, are giving them an instruction manual of what it is that they are to do. When you're doing that, you're giving them the instruction manual to your grandchildren. This is how you act as a Christian adult when, in fact, when you are married, that it is not a lifetime commitment. Mm-hmm. And then you are looking, and then you're doing probably the same thing when you're 70. It's not unlikely that you'll have parents that could be 90. And so you got these 5 generations that are alive at the same time. And you are modeling a solution for them to a problem which has a decision that goes along with it, and that that will impact your legacy. So you can impact your legacy down, and you can impact your legacy up.
Wow. I got to tell you, that was a real downer of a segment, but I know it's so important that we deal with this because for years, divorce wasn't impacting the older generations. And now today, divorce is decimating the older generations. And the success that the enemy has is if you could decimate the older generations, it rolls downhill, as you just said. When we come back in segment 3, after we have our second conversation, continuing conversation with Pastor Gary Gilmore as to what he's seeing about isolation and how he's dealing with these issues as a chaplain and as a pastor. In segment 3, Bruce, I want to really talk about the hope, because there's got to be hope, right? There's hope here, right?
There absolutely is.
We'll be right back with more.
Judy and I are an example of it.
That's right. And we'll be back with more on iRetire4Him.
Recreating Retirement is an interactive small group study helping you to move from nothing to what's next. You can join us on Wednesdays at 6 p.m. East Coast time on Facebook Live. Our goal for this study is to provide a group setting for interaction and new ideas while leading you through a first step in your journey from retirement to reformation. Here's the big idea. During the next 5 years, 5,000 small groups will experience this journey of discovery in churches and faith-based organizations across the country. Is your church a place where recreating retirement needs to be planted? Join us online to experience the study or prepare to lead a small group at your church or ministry. Email us at contactus@retirementreformation.org or go to our website at retirementreformation.org. That's retirementreformation.org.
Hey, welcome back to iRetire4Him. And as we do with every second segment of every show, we always bring in a special guest to share their story of how God is using them in their retirement years. We've got Pastor Gary Gilmore from First Baptist Church of Marionville, Missouri, back on with us this week to finish sharing his story. He shared last time about his experience in the military and how God has uniquely positioned him to be a military chaplain and now a retired military chaplain, yet still volunteering to doing it and working with the governor here in Missouri. But also, it's given him a perspective into working with retirees and some of the things they're struggling with. And so Bruce brought him back to be able to dig deeper on some of these issues. Bruce, go ahead.
Gary, welcome back. We're glad that you're here. Your experiences and the way God has uniquely prepared you, I think will give you some insights to be able to answer some of these questions, or at least bring a perspective to them.
Sure.
As you worked with the 12 to 14,000 military people that are spread throughout the state, and you've seen all kinds of both tragedy and all kinds of things happen. Talk a little bit about how you have seen the issue of loneliness and isolation impact the lives and the families of people, and how being connected to God is the answer to that is the answer to that problem, and how that's played itself out.
Sure. So my experience was we would all have our lives. We would come together in the National Guard for our unit and drills and training. And then all of a sudden, we said goodbye to our families, and we were the family. And we would go overseas. We would do our mission. We dealt with the good things and we dealt with the hard things. But then we would come back home and scatter again. And that isolation of, here we were thrown into this new total dynamic, and it's 24/7. You don't get to come home on weekends. I got the all expense paid trip to Iraq. That's a long commute, okay? But then you come home, and then you would go, and the guy that you were in the Hummer with, or the helicopter, or your battle buddy, and you're watching out for each other the whole time. Man, it is so good to be home, and we're so tired of each other. We don't want to see each other for a while. And even though we came back for some, hey, here's a training session on how to get along at home, or here's a marriage retreat we're going to offer because we want you to stay strong, it was very easy to just turn in. But what had happened was we had changed. Our families had changed. And I compared it to like going around this big mountain where you could throw a message, an email, or a letter over the mountain, but it's not the same as being together. And then all of a sudden you come back at home on the other side, and everyone thinks, well, that's over. You don't have to worry about it anymore. Oh, no. You have to fall in love all over again. You have to rewire the connections. And we just are built this way. We're social. We need each other. We needed the extended family of the Guard, but that was when someone had traumatic brain injury or a scary experience or was grieving the loss of something in country or something at home. And we turn within ourselves. And I one time asked my unit, I stood in a formation, I said, ladies and gentlemen, we would take a bullet for one another when we're in country. Why is it you won't pick up the telephone and just call your buddy and say, hey, how are you doing today? Just that connection, just that little touch. It doesn't have to be, I want to hear the whole life story. It may grow into that because we need that. Right. But just the connection of we are still together. So that isolation fed the trauma, fed the brain things, fed the spiral that went inside. And then, oh joy, I'm moving into the next topic, addiction. Well, I'm self-medicating or pills or, I go out and I don't want to be with anybody else. I just want to be by myself. Why is grandpa so mad? Why is dad so mad? What's changed? We don't know. And then, when we saw him 2 days a month, there's 28 days we didn't see him.
Right.
And that spiral. Yeah.
So question for you. How do you, those issues that you identified within the military relationships?
Yeah.
Is there a similarity between what happens in the church to what happened in that military context? Talk about that for just a little bit.
Well, so being an old guy in the Army, you're there long enough, you get promoted, and you get promoted right out of a job. You're finally at your peak. You think you've got it, and then you go, well, you're not needed anymore. Thank you very much. God bless you in the new chapter of your life. And retirees 6 months out are often lost about what do I do? How do I reconnect? Here I have the wisdom. Here I have the experience. And that can turn into isolation. It can find its way into more my thing of let's take on too many new projects because we need to be needed. Or where's that happy balance? How do I find the role? How do I shift gears into that overdrive gear where I do have the wisdom, I do have the experience? Now I need that person I can mentor. Now I need that discipling relationship. Now I need maybe just that one class where I can open God's word and just share out of that history what's going on.
What's your observation, Gary, about the, just a general observation, not about your church specifically, but as you observe seniors in general, how many of them are struggling with those kinds of issues in your experience? Well,
I would just say I did do a little homework and I looked up suicide rates by age, and they measure the number of suicides per 100,000. And while there's this big spike at the front with younger and some of the life crisis things, seriously, it is the highest, 2021, the last statistics, the highest number was 85 or older at over 22 suicides per 100,000 in that year. And you look at that and you go, okay, wait. I'm alone. I may have lost my partner. I don't have the career. I don't have the position I had. People don't call me sir anymore, No one saluted me lately, right? Well, those simple signs of respect are gone. And then I'm taking more medicine than I've ever taken in my life. Oh no, it's very easy to combine that with alcohol or actually marijuana. Trying this cannabis thing is now trying to calm seniors. I've had seniors ask me about, what do you think about this CBD stuff? I say, I don't think it works well with other medicines. You better talk to your doctor. Don't just go buy something. And then if you're home alone and you've got nowhere to go, nothing to do, and no one to be with, and you're a military veteran and you have a weapon nearby, you are primed for one bad day that could totally change your legacy, your family heritage. And there is no need for it because the guy that you went to coffee with this morning would love to have you come over to his table and say, do you mind if I sit down a little bit? Can we talk? What's been going on with you? And that might be the only thing. And once that opens up, you say, could I share with you what the Lord has done for me? Who knows what God would do with a conversation like that?
Well, that's a beautiful observation. Thank you, Jim. You got any closing questions?
Well, just one final one. You are a pastor of a small church in a small town in southwestern Missouri. And being a part of your congregation, I know that most everybody else in the congregation is older than me. So they're in their 60s and 70s and 80s and above. Are you seeing, well, let me ask the question differently. How is the church adapting to the issues that seniors are facing today with isolation, loneliness, addiction, divorce, suicide, bankruptcy? I mean, how is the church adapting to something that we never dealt with in the past with their seniors, but we're dealing with it today? Just a quick answer.
Did. Yeah, so I'm at the end of the boomers. You know, they said one time, if you want to see a boomer, there's the chaplain right there. That was not a compliment. However, the needs are there. The needs are great. You talk about great testimonies and life stories. I think we are learning, and the church is wise to listen to the wisdom and the experience. And what I love about the senior adults in our church is that I look at their families 2 and 3 generations down now. And while they don't do church the way I did church, they have a faith, and grandma and grandpa have been the role model and the example for them. What a legacy they are leaving. If we could just capture that and build on that legacy, I think we will enrich the church in many, many ways. That's where I'm wanting to take us.
Yeah, we got to get our seniors to pour their lives into the next generations because they have so much to offer. Pastor Gary Gilmore, thank you for joining us all the way from Marionville, Missouri. Appreciate you being on iRetire4Him today.
Thanks, Gary. God bless.
Bruce, thank you. I'm loving your book and loving the ministry. I've already shared it with a friend of mine in a nearby town, and I'm going to have him contact you. So thank you.
I look forward
guys
to that. Maybe
very,
we can come
very
and do
much.
a Oxygen or Life for event for a couple of churches together. That'd be a fun thing to do.
You're listening to iRetire4Him. We'll be right back.
Our work on this earth doesn't end when the paycheck stops. God calls us to be faithful for a lifetime. Whether you're looking forward to retirement or you're already there, our all-small group study, Recreating Retirement, will help you understand, engage, and activate what God has for you in this fourth quarter of life. Join Retirement Reformation founder Bruce Bruinsma as you consider your past, strengths, spiritual gifts, and your passions, and how they all come together as the call God has for you in these years. Connect with us on our online community group at facebook.com/Retirement Reformation, Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern, or if you'd like to bring Recreating Retirement to your church, email us at contactus@retirementreformation.org. Are you ready to start your life-changing journey today?
Hey, welcome back to iRetire4Him as we're talking about isolation, which leads to divorce in seniors. Bruce, it was a great conversation with Pastor Gilmore and really just capturing from Gary's heart what he's seeing in his own congregation and what he's seen with retired military people. I want to make sure that we talk about, as we talk about isolation which leads to divorce, let's talk about some hope. Because if people are getting divorced in their 70s and 80s, it's devastating their entire family line. Talk to us about where's the hope in this conversation. Start us off.
You know, one of the wonderful things that as a Christ follower that we can embrace is the fact that our God is a God of relationships, and that he created us because he wanted a relationship with us. We screwed it up, but he loves us so much he wants that relationship to continue. And so he sent his son, and his saving grace allows that relationship to remain intact and to go forward. When we take that as a model and we think about our relationship with our spouse, I think a really, really hopeful thought or perspective is that in our relationship with our spouse, we want them and need them to be our best friend. To be our best friend. And so as Jesus said that we were his friend, we are to have that friendship with our spouse. Now, to have a friend doesn't just appear out of the ether. It isn't just an emotional explosion and then everything comes together and it stays together. It doesn't work that way. There may have been a bit of an explosion the first time you saw your spouse, as was in my case in this little church in Columbus, Ohio, and nobody my age, and Judy walks in and I'm going, oh my goodness, look at this good looking blonde. Thank you, Jesus. Okay. But you need more than that for 61 years to exist. And so the decision that your spouse is going to be your friend, as Gary shared with you and I, a story of one of his friends. Oh no, you were sharing it with me. A gentleman who has been very active in ministry and so on, but now in his late 70s has realized that perhaps he hadn't been as good a husband as he could be. And now he's going to dedicate some serious time to building a new friendship with his wife and showing that he cares and he puts her first in his activities. And so I think it's relationship and friendship which are the key, and those are decisions, and there are patterns and ways to be able to do that, and you can make those decisions each and every day. And as you do, you build a new foundation upon which to build the next stage of life.
Well, let's just say some of our listeners are in their late 50s, 60s, or early 70s, and they've just retired. Mm-hmm. So often, Bruce, you and I hear that people had such a great time working, but while they were working, they really weren't paying attention or nurturing that friendship with their spouse that is not working with them. And that there's a time of adjustment. There's a great book, Spouse in the House, that you might want to get to read about that one. But we've got to get to know each other and remind ourselves why we married those people. But friendship, as you said, takes work. But that stuff can be rekindled. God brought you together and he gives you the strength. But I think let's bring Jesus into this conversation because, again, there's no healing in a marriage. There's no blossoming in a friendship or flourishing in a friendship without Jesus at the center of this conversation. How do we bring Jesus into this? How do we bring Jesus into eliminating the isolation and eliminating divorce? Bruce, talk to us about this.
Well, how do you maintain your relationship with Jesus? You maintain your relationship with Jesus by talking to him, prayer, understanding and reading what it is that he has said and what he brings to us in the Bible, being aware of the shaping with the fruits of the Spirit by the Holy Spirit in our lives. There's a model for us in our relationship with our spouses. So do I make Judy a priority or do I not? And we each know when we are doing that or we are not, as the case may be. When there would be something to go, a football game to go see with your spouse and your grandsons, and you decide to go play golf. Think about it. And so it's the decisions that we make and the priorities that we give and the efforts that we are willing to extend. We know that there's, the 5 love languages. Here's a question. Do you know what the love language of your spouse is?
There's usually 2.
And there's usually 2. That's right. Exactly right. A primary and a secondary. And are you playing into those? In our case, Judy's primary love language is acts of service. When she needs something done and she tells me, Bruce, would you? Now, there's the key point right there. First of all, do I hear it? And secondly, what's the time frame between doing it and hearing it? And if the time frame between hearing it and doing it is very short, it builds our relationship. When the time frame between hearing it and not doing it expands, our relationship is more distant.
And if she has to remind you multiple times, it totally defeats the purpose of you serving in the first place. All right, totally. So Bruce, and I love the fact that you and Judy are willing to live this out in front of us. Maybe we should bring Judy back and talk about this. I don't know. Let's talk about how Retirement Reformation can help equip couples to not give up, to help them eliminate isolation. Have you thought of any ideas, or are there already things in the pipeline, or are already things on the website, retirementreformation.org, in case I said that too fast, that can come alongside the couples listening today so that they don't get divorced?
Well, first of all, connecting to each other, and then connecting to things that have meaning and purpose for each of them or for them together outside of themselves. So there's that activity piece. I think there's another, I've done a survey of the organizations that I can find and the groups that I can find that do marital counseling and marital retreats and so on. I'm sorry to say I can't find one that does that for seniors. And so one of the things that we will begin, and for our audience, please, if you've got either information or you'd like to step into that conversation or you've got a perspective that we can use, we want to be able to bring together and find groups that can do marriage retreats, for lack of a term, marriage retreats for seniors, because it is so badly needed. Maybe there's some out there, and I just haven't been a very good researcher. So if anybody in the audience knows, again, please reach back out for us and help us to do that. If you are someone who has skills or abilities in doing marriage retreats, and you'd like to talk to us about putting together a curriculum that specifically deals with that, please let us know, because I am totally convinced that God has a message for seniors in marriage that is critical towards their happiness and to build the kingdom and to be able to erase or be part of erasing those issues of isolation and loneliness in their lives and all the negativity that we're talking about that has come as a result, and is really an encouraging answer that is out there for us.
Well, and join our online Facebook group on Retirement Reformation. Join that group. But we also recommend, Bruce and I highly recommend, that you join a local small group Bible study. Get in a group with other people. That's the first way to start eliminating isolation, because you're usually not going to make terrible decisions like considering divorce if you're surrounded by people who are willing to never give up on their marriages. Bruce, great conversation, great encouragement. We need to remind ourselves about this often. And we thank you and Judy for the legacy of 61 years, and my parents of 69 years, and Martha's parents of 66 years. It sets a tone for Martha and I, who've only been married 37 years, that don't give up, that there's always hope, and that things can be great even at 61 years. But thank you, Bruce.
God bless, my friend.
You've been listening to iRetire4Him, the voice and resource of the Retirement Reformation with founder Bruce Bruinsma. I'm your host, Jim Brangenberg. We're Christ followers stretching our faith in our retirement years so we can say along with Jesus, I retire with Him.
For Him.
Thanks for listening to I Retire for Him with your hosts, Jim and Martha Brangenberg, and Retirement Reformation founder, Bruce Bruinsma. I Retire for Him is the mouthpiece of the Retirement Reformation. Most Christians tend to follow the world's pattern of rest and self-pampering during retirement. However, in your retirement, you can be focused on God's unique call to love, serve, and help others. This can be your best season of life if you take advantage of a life's worth of knowledge and experience and combine it with a greater freedom of time and money and invest it all in the generations both preceding and following you. The Retirement Reformation is encouraging Christians to find and follow God's call in all seasons and aspects of life, especially in retirement. Take time to sign the manifesto at retirementreformation.org and explore the wealth of resources available on our site. Join this movement of God and journey from retirement to reformation so you can say, I retire for Him. Go to retirementreformation.org.